The chain made a soft clink as the girl was pushed forward, knees buckling, blood on her lip, and dirt smeared across one cheek. Her hoodie was torn at the collar, one sleeve missing. She stood, 16 years old, arms restrained behind her back, eyes too calm for the setting. Across from her, a semicircle of alien generals smirked and leaned back in their massive obsidian thrones, amused by the frail prize brought before them. One with flared mandibles scoffed and said, "Earth has fallen if this is the only thing it had left to send." The chamber laughed. Lyra looked up, face bruised but defiant, and said evenly, "You should all run." The laughter slowed. "Why?" One general sneered, leaning forward. She met his gaze and answered, "Because you're still in the room, and my guardian has already landed." The silence was heavy for 5 seconds. Nothing moved. Then one general snorted, waved a claw dismissively, and the laughter resumed, louder than before. They called her bluff, called her broken, a toy left behind by a ruined planet, but none of them noticed the small vibration in the floor, not yet. Lyra lowered her head, no longer speaking, letting the weight of her words hang like a noose. An alien handler yanked her by the elbow and chained her to a ceremonial pillar at the center of the negotiation hall. The throne room of Sector Prime had not seen a human since Earth's last delegation, long before Lyra was even born. That delegation ended with the envoy vaporized mid-speech, Earth's demands ignored, and every surviving human asset erased or enslaved. Now, years later, they paraded Lyra as a symbol of final dominance. A civilian girl, allegedly the daughter of the last Earth diplomat, now offered as a bargaining chip to finalize Earth's total submission. At least, that's what the generals believed. A towering general named Varth clicked his claws together and stepped forward. His chest plate bore over 40 insignias of conquered planets, and his voice boomed like thunder in a can. "Girl, Earth has no high command left. Your cities are ash, your networks are dead. You are alone. Accept your place." He motioned to a chair beside his throne, a mock gesture of twisted civility. Lyra didn't move. She stared at the ground, quietly counting under her breath. 6, 5. Varth leaned closer. "Speak before I remove your tongue." Lyra looked up and smiled faintly. "You can't afford the time." Elsewhere in the ship, 3 floors below, a hallway flickered with emergency lighting. 8 guards patrolled the security sector, unaware their command feed had already gone dark. One stopped near a panel, noticing static where the camera feed should have been. He tapped his earpiece, got no response, and turned to signal his partner. His partner was gone. Not fallen, gone. The only trace left was a few drops of green blood smeared down the wall, and a single dent in the titanium floor shaped like a boot heel. A shadow passed silently behind him. Back in the chamber, General Varth turned back to the others. "She's broken, clearly drugged. Let us move to the ceremony." A newer general, younger and more eager, tilted his head curiously. "But her words. The Guardian. We've heard no signal from Earth, no resistance, no movement. What if he didn't finish?" The room laughed again, this time mocking him. Another general slapped a claw on the table. "Earth couldn't guard its own moon colonies. What makes you think it still has guardians?" Lyra sat quietly, as 2 armed brutes took their place behind her. One tapped on a wrist device to send a confirmation signal that the hostage was secured, but the signal didn't go through. The device blinked red, then black. The message bounced back with a single code, K0 protocol engaged. The brute stared at the screen, then glanced at his partner. "What's K0?" he asked in his native tongue. The partner shook his head. "Nothing in our systems. Probably a jam." But deep down, something primal shivered in both of them. In the tech operations room, alarms were blinking but making no sound. The AI core was offline. The master terminal, which required 5 simultaneous authorizations to shut down, was suddenly stuck in a silent boot loop. One technician leaned over to investigate and whispered, "That's not a glitch." He noticed a line of code, unfamiliar and old, embedded deep in the root directory. It didn't match any known protocol from the galactic directory. It only read, "Asset 013 active. Clearance unbound. Status engage." Then the lights went out in the tech wing, and not a single technician was heard from again. In the chamber, the air grew heavy, not from pressure or temperature, but from atmosphere. Lyra sat up straighter. She could feel it. He was close. The generals didn't notice yet, but she knew what it meant. Her silence wasn't submission. It was the final mercy they'd get. The younger general who had earlier questioned her leaned forward again. "Who is your guardian?" Lyra didn't answer, so he tried again. "Why are you so calm?" She looked up at him, her voice soft, her eyes cold. "Because the last time they took me, he killed an entire moon base to get me back. That base had over 3,000 hostiles. Only I walked out." The general paled. Then the first explosion happened, not near the chamber, not dramatic, just a muffled thud in the distance. Then silence again. One of the guards beside Lyra turned his head. Another thud, then another. Suddenly, all the lights in the throne room dimmed, and a warning tone buzzed, but no words followed. "A malfunction," one of the generals assumed, until the doors to the chamber began to close by themselves, sealing from the outside. Barth rose to his full height. "Who authorized this lockdown?" No one answered. Then came a voice, not loud, not amplified, just perfectly centered in the chamber from all angles, as if it came from inside their heads. "I did." Every general turned at once. A lone figure stood in the open doorway just before it sealed, cloaked in dark civilian armor, no markings, no faction. He didn't carry a flag or wear a badge, just a blade sheathed on his back, and what looked like a cracked helmet hanging from his waist. He stepped forward, as the doors sealed behind him with a final metallic hiss. The Guardian had arrived, and no one in that room was walking out. The silence in the chamber was almost louder than the laughter that had filled it just minutes earlier. The Guardian stood completely still. His face was hidden in shadows, his presence so quiet it made every creature in that throne room feel exposed. No formal introduction, no announcement, just the weight of certainty in his arrival. Lyra didn't move, didn't speak. She simply looked up at him, and her eyes said everything. He was here. They were already dead. One of the younger guards, trying to prove himself, stepped forward, weapon raised. He barked something in his native tongue, a command to surrender. The Guardian didn't flinch. The guard's weapon shook slightly as he tried to repeat the command louder. The Guardian's right foot shifted a fraction of an inch. The movement was subtle, but in that moment, the guard lost all confidence. His trigger finger froze. His breath caught. The Guardian took a single step forward, and the weapon clattered to the floor. The guard backed away, eyes wide, until he hit the wall and dropped to his knees. General Barth growled in disgust. He stepped down from the platform, towering over the others, mandibles flared, tail bristling with contempt. "This is the threat Earth sends? A man in rags and shadow tricks." He activated his battle harness, spikes flaring from his armor, and motioned to the remaining guards. "End him." "No." The Guardian didn't even unsheath his weapon. The first guard charged from the right, his bladed arm crackling with plasma. He reached the Guardian's side and dropped before the swing landed. The sound of something snapping echoed through the chamber. No one saw the move. The second and third guards came in at once from opposite angles, a blur of motion. Two bodies hit the ground at the exact same time, their weapons still buzzing harmlessly beside them. Barth took a step back. He's augmented. No, Lyra said softly, still seated and chained. He's not. He's trained. The generals were soldiers, conquerors, commanders of vast planetary armies, but none of them had ever faced a war that didn't come with warnings and blaring signals. None of them had seen Earth's unfiltered response. The Guardian was not from Earth's Navy or its failed diplomatic corps. He was from the Forgotten File Systems, a name spoken only when the rules had failed and the war had gone off the books. One of the warlords at the far end of the chamber whispered something to another, a name, a code. It wasn't listed in any public records, but the old warlords knew it, a protocol that Earth was rumored to have created for recovery operations during the siege of Mercury. A single operative bonded to a target, dispatched with no chain of command, designed to succeed or ensure no survivors remained. Kill protocol. General Varth raised his blade staff and roared, activating the chamber's internal defense grid. Drones emerged from panels in the ceiling, arcing into the air, weapons trained on the Guardian. He moved fast, but not recklessly. He grabbed a fallen guard's arm, spun it into the air like a shield. The plasma rounds from the drones vaporized their own soldier before they could recalibrate. He leapt onto the nearest column, used it as a springboard, and landed beside the control console. 2 strikes with his elbow cracked the terminal open. The lights dimmed. The drones collapsed. Static buzzed briefly, then cleared. Varth charged. The Guardian dodged the first swipe, twisted, and drove a boot into the back of Vartha's knee. Armor cracked. The general roared again, swinging wildly. The Guardian caught the blade staff midair, twisted it downward, and struck Varth in the jaw with the hilt. The sound of the impact rang out across the room, like a bell. One general tried to flee, running to the corridor exit. The doors wouldn't open. A voice played softly through the speakers, Lyra's voice. Access denied. You are in breach of Earth Guardian Treaty 004. The general turned, panicked, only to find the Guardian already standing there, no weapon drawn, just his bare hands. That was all it took. Back near the center of the room, Lyra sat still as the last of her restraints disengaged. The chains fell to the floor. She stood up slowly, walked across the room barefoot, and stopped beside the Guardian. He knelt before her just for a second to check her wrist, where the chains had bruised her skin. She nodded, no words. He stood again. Another general, desperate now, called for orbital reinforcements. His wrist device blinked red, no connection. Another tried the emergency kill switch, disabled. Another pressed his private distress beacon, nothing. The Guardian systems had already rerouted every frequency across the Galactic Fleet command channel. A single message played on repeat. It wasn't coded. It wasn't encrypted. It was just one line, spoken in the Guardian's voice. Earth's ward has been targeted. Kill protocol active. Extraction in progress. Interference will result in full asset termination. Lyra stepped forward, now directly addressing the generals. You didn't know who I was. That's your first mistake. You thought I was a hostage. I'm not. I'm the only reason you're still breathing, because he doesn't act unless I say so. The Guardian didn't speak. He just waited. Lyra walked to the center of the chamber, where the high throne once stood. She climbed it, turned, and faced the room. You think you rule this galaxy because you crush weak systems, but Earth never fought you with everything. You've only ever met our diplomats, our science fleets, our ambassadors. She paused. You've never met our monsters. She raised her hand. The Guardian drew his blade. No more pretending. That was all she said. The next second, the chamber turned red. The last phase of extraction had begun. The high command of the sector fleet was now considered a terminated threat. They had mocked Earth. They had targeted its bloodline. Now they were learning what Earth sends when diplomacy dies, and there was no surrender button left. The control chamber deep beneath the throne room had gone dark 3 minutes ago. Tech officers scrambled in silence, working under red emergency lights as one after another of their systems dropped offline. Communication lines were severed. Internal trackers returned only static. The Guardian had turned the fortress into a sealed tomb, and now they were just counting down the rooms he'd already cleared. Room 7 was silent. Room 6 returned no data. Room 5's last visual was a frame of a severed drone arm clattering against a steel grate before the feed died mid-frame. It wasn't chaos, it was surgical. Everything fell in perfect intervals. One technician leaned in, staring at the trace logs, and whispered to himself without even realizing, "He's timing it. He's giving them a pattern, so they know exactly how long they have left." Back in the throne chamber, General Varth leaned against the wall, blood dripping down his jawline from the earlier hit. His pride was already shattered, but now something deeper was breaking. He'd faced insurgents. He'd watched stars burn under his command. But never had he felt the certainty of loss before the battle had even begun. The Guardian hadn't killed them all yet, not because he couldn't, but because he was waiting, and that made him more terrifying than any weapon Varth had seen in 5 wars. Lyra stood at the center of the chamber, a glowing interface pulled up on the Council's emergency command platform. They hadn't noticed when she started accessing it. She didn't look like a hacker, didn't speak like a tech, and yet every command obeyed her touch. The system recognized her DNA. More than that, it recognized her authority, because Lyra wasn't just the daughter of a diplomat. She was the last living descendant of Earth's first unification architect, a line erased from history in the final war to avoid assassination. Her guardianship wasn't coincidence. It was the most classified protection program ever launched, and it ended only in 2 ways: full safety or complete system wipe. One of the remaining generals, desperate and panting, limped toward the console. He tried to override the lockdown. Lyra didn't even look at him. Her fingers moved across the screen faster than he could read. When he reached for the pad, the Guardian was suddenly behind him. No noise, no motion seen, just there. The general froze, his hand in midair, as a hand gripped the back of his neck. He didn't scream. The Guardian simply pushed, and the general. "You are forcing a war your people cannot win. This is not strategy. This is vengeance." Crumpled, unconscious General Threx, the eldest among them, finally spoke, his voice calm but hollow. Lyra looked at him and replied with no emotion. "You forced it when you thought a child made the perfect hostage. You forced it when you murdered my family. And now you want to talk about consequences?" She took a step toward him. "Earth is not hunting you. I am." A siren blared once, only once. The wall shimmered slightly as defensive plating dropped. The floor beneath the general's thrones began to retract, revealing magnetic conduits, locking down their only escape vessel. The entire city-sized war station was under external override. Lyra had activated the failsafe buried in the negotiation protocols written before her birth, a code hidden in galactic diplomatic treaties, a protocol tied to her blood. It was never intended to be used. It was designed as a myth. But now it was real. The Guardian moved again, not fast, just certain. Another general attempted to raise a weapon. It shattered before he could aim. The next one tried to activate a personal shield. It failed mid-charge, overridden by the station core. The remaining one simply stood there, breathing shallow, cornered not by brute force, but by the knowledge that they were prey. In the outer sectors of the war station, some soldiers were still alive. They didn't engage, they didn't fight. They simply put down their weapons and moved away from the command corridors. Some of them even broadcast messages on local loops. "We didn't know. We were not told. We surrender. Please stand down." But those messages weren't reaching the chamber. The Guardian had isolated the command deck completely. What happened inside this room wouldn't be written in logs or captured on feeds. It would be remembered in whispers and myths. Lyra stood before the high throne again, this time not as a prisoner. The command interface rotated at her side, displaying battle maps, troop placements, everything the generals once hoarded as power. One of the warlords finally collapsed to his knees and muttered, "What are you?" Lyra didn't answer him. The Guardian did. "She is the failover. The one we protect. The key Earth never gave away. You thought she was bait. She was the lock, and now she has the key." Suddenly, a distant boom echoed through the upper levels. It wasn't a weapon. It was a ship breaking dock. One of the escape vessels had overridden manual control and launched itself directly into deep space. On board were only two things: a command archive of Earth's legacy treaties and a broadcast beacon that repeated a single message on every frequency. This was not an act of war. This was an act of protection. Violate Earth's peace again, and next time we won't send a Guardian. We'll send what comes after. Back in the chamber, General Varth stood again, bloody but not yet broken. He pointed at Lyra, voice trembling, and said, "We still have fleets. We still control 6 systems. We can rebuild. You can't erase us all." Lyra walked right up to him, looked him in the eyes, and said, "We don't have to. You're going to destroy each other trying to recover from this. And we'll just watch." The Guardian nodded. His blade was sheathed again. His mission was no longer violent. The target had shifted from elimination to something colder: survival through fear, power not through death, but memory. Because every general who left this room alive would carry the story of the girl they mocked, of the Guardian they triggered, and of Earth's final silence before the storm. Lyra looked at the console one last time. She touched the seal. Her family symbol glowed briefly, then faded. The override disengaged. The room unlocked. The doors opened. And not a single general dared to move first. Outside the sealed throne chamber, no one approached the door. The guards who had survived the earlier breach now stood far back, weapons slung low, eyes averted. No orders were barked, no alarms triggered. The war station, once a fortress humming with commands and the noise of mechanical precision, had gone completely quiet. The presence of the Guardian didn't just break systems, it broke will. Even the station's automated turrets had gone dormant, their targeting logs scrambled by the same silent override that had locked the generals inside, but no one tried to repair them. No one wanted to be seen trying. Inside the chamber, lights flickered back to their normal glow. The atmosphere hadn't changed, but the energy had. The generals stood as statues, no longer grand or defiant, just men and monsters whose empires were crumbling beneath the weight of a single misjudgment. Lyra stepped down from the command dais, walking slowly toward the center of the room. Her steps were soft, but they echoed like they carried judgment with them. The Guardian stood at the far edge, his arms folded, his presence still and unreadable. He had drawn no blood in the last 10 minutes, not because he couldn't, but because his role was already fulfilled. He had arrived. He had stood between Lyra and the threat, and now that the threat had changed form, so had the mission. The sword remained sheathed, but its silence was louder than any war cry. Lyra stopped in front of General Threx. He was the only one who hadn't moved since the beginning, his ancient frame stiff, his eyes never leaving her. He had watched an entire legacy turn to ashen hours. His voice, when he finally spoke, was dry. "You didn't just come to retaliate. You came to erase our authority." Lyra nodded. "We didn't start this. You did. When you kidnapped me, when you slaughtered the last envoys and turned peace into theater. We had to show you something you'd never forget." Threx tilted his head. "And what is it we're meant to learn? That Earth doesn't play your game. that we don't care about titles or empires or the size of your fleets. You made the mistake of thinking we were silent because we were weak. But the truth is, Earth doesn't shout when it's angry. It whispers. And when it whispers, something ancient answers. A low chime sounded from the interface beside her. Lyra turned her head slightly. The ship's outermost sensors had just registered the approach of a small vessel, not hostile, human design, stealth class. It hovered just outside weapons range, broadcasting no signal except a short-range encrypted tag. Lyra smiled. She recognized the signature. Extraction was inbound. Not to retrieve her, but to deliver the final statement. The chamber dimmed again, not from system failure, but by command. A projection activated at the center of the room, showing every major system in the galactic fleet's known holdings. Red markers bloomed one by one across the map. No attacks, no detonations. Just code infiltrations. Quiet changes. The fleet navigation satellites were being reprogrammed. Their capital ships had been temporarily disabled. Their communication nodes were being rerouted through Earth-link proxies. Lyra didn't look away from the projection as she spoke. What you don't understand is that this wasn't revenge. It was a correction. We let you build your web. We let you circle us because we knew what would happen the moment you crossed the line. You triggered Earth's kill protocol. And now that it's here, it won't kill you. It will make sure you never forget the price of touching us. One of the generals slumped into his seat, defeated. We'll be hunted. Our people will demand retribution. You've humiliated us in front of the systems we command. Lyra looked at him. Then don't go back. Don't tell them. Leave this room. Disappear. Say the station had an accident. Say you were compromised by internal betrayal. Or tell the truth and let fear do our work for us. Either way, you will never be in the same room with Earth again. The Guardian turned to the main exit doors. He tapped once on the side panel. A secondary path opened behind the chamber, not marked on any of the General's blueprints. It was an extraction corridor, one built for emergency evacuation, but repurposed now as a message. As Lyra and the Guardian walked toward it, the generals made no move to follow. Lyra paused just before stepping through. She turned and said one last thing. Tell your successors this. Earth doesn't care about your treaties anymore. If you want peace, stay quiet. If you want war, send someone louder. And then she was gone. The path closed behind them. Outside, the stealth vessel drifted silently. The Guardian and Lyra emerged onto the docking platform. The vessel's hatch opened without a sound. No welcoming crew, no fanfare, just a seat for her and standing room for him. As the hatch sealed, the ship's engines engaged. Not warp, not speed, just steady departure. It didn't need to escape. No one would dare follow. In the throne chamber, the generals remained still, surrounded by the wreckage of their certainty. The projection still hovered above them. The red signals on the map had not faded. They blinked slowly, methodically, like a countdown. But nothing exploded. Nothing burned. That was the point. Earth hadn't come to conquer. It had come to correct the record. And now that the message had been delivered, the universe would remember not the firepower, not the sword. They would remember the girl they chained, and who walked through their door to unchain her. The ship glided across deep space without sound or signature. It didn't need to hide because no one was looking. The moment Lyra and the Guardian left the war station, the signal silence that followed was total. Not one broadcast, not one threat, no retaliation, no scramble to recover control. The generals remained on their throne deck, surrounded by the shadow of what they had witnessed, unsure if they were even still in power or merely figureheads waiting for their planets to forget their failure. The image of the Guardian standing unarmed, untouched, and unanswered would follow them longer than the sight of any battle. But it was Lyra they would remember more than anyone. The girl who didn't yell, who didn't plead, who sat in silence and smiled when they laughed at her, who said one line and meant every word of it. "You should run." Inside the vessel, Lyra sat in a small passenger chair near the viewport. Her legs were curled beneath her, her hands rested calmly in her lap, and her eyes were fixed on the stars. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The Guardian stood a few feet away, quiet as always, body still but never relaxed. He wasn't built for rest. He wasn't meant for peace. He was a weapon that wore human shape, designed to act only when there was nothing left to say. And now, for the first time in a long time, he was standing with no orders. A soft chime rang through the cabin, alerting them of proximity to Earth's lunar boundary. The ship had taken a long route back, skirting old debris fields and inactive patrol grids. Lyra reached for the console, her fingers brushing the navigation pad. A screen blinked on. Earth's atmosphere glowed blue in the distance. She didn't smile, but her shoulders eased slightly. The Guardian noticed but said nothing. He was trained to respond to threats, not feelings. But Lyra had always been different. She didn't need him to speak. She just needed to know he was there. A soft voice came through the ship's system. It was synthetic, polite, coded from Earth's secure channels. "Welcome back, Asset 03. Lunar Station has cleared you for silent approach. All non-essential tracking has been scrubbed." The Guardian tapped the console once to acknowledge. Lyra leaned back in her seat again, and they both stared out as the moon grew larger. Its far side glowed faintly with base lighting. Earth's presence wasn't always loud. Sometimes it hid in plain sight, waiting for a moment like this. As the ship docked, a team of medics waited near the hangar, but Lyra waved them off. She didn't need a scan. She wasn't broken. What she needed was silence. A room without walls closing in, without the hum of false diplomacy or the scent of fear in the air. The Guardian walked beside her without a word, matching her stride, his eyes scanning everything. The base personnel didn't ask who he was. They didn't salute. They moved out of the way, not out of fear, out of respect for something they all understood. If you had to ask why he was here, you didn't belong in the room. Inside the station's upper hall, Lyra was led to a viewing platform. Below, through the massive reinforced glass, Earth hovered in the black sky. It looked calm, beautiful, deceptively quiet. She stared at it for a long time, without blinking. The Guardian stood near the doorway, his posture unchanged. Eventually, she broke the silence. "I'm not going back to the academy." The Guardian didn't respond. She turned toward him. "I'm done with politics. I don't want a seat at the table. They can keep their titles. Let them rebuild it all without me." Still, he said nothing. She nodded to herself. "I just want to live somewhere no one laughs at me for being small. Somewhere no one needs me to be more than I am." At last, the Guardian moved. He stepped closer, the soft buzz of his steps breaking the silence like ripples in water. He set something down beside her, a small box. Inside was a plain wristband embedded with a simple tag. She picked it up. It had no seal, no code, no symbol. She looked at him. "What is it?" He answered quietly. "You asked for peace. That's what it is." She held it in her palm and realized what he meant. It was a civilian ID, one that didn't link back to any treaty, any legacy, any bloodline. A new identity, one that would let her walk anywhere, live quietly, and never again be a pawn in someone else's negotiation. She turned back to the viewport and slipped it on. The metal warmed slightly against her skin. There. That was the sound of choice, not thunder, not war, just silence that she had earned. Later, as she sat alone in her quarters, she opened a small personal screen. A single secure message had come through. Not from Earth Command. Not from the Council. Just a name, someone she'd never met, someone who signed the message only with a few short lines. You did what we couldn't. You showed them the difference between noise and power. Rest easy, Lyra. We're watching the stars now, and they're watching you. She turned off the screen. No medals. No ceremonies. No historical archives. Just a name they'd whisper when arrogance rose again in the galaxy. The girl they mocked, the guardian who answered, and the silence that followed. Far away, in a shadowed section of Earth's deep archive facility, a log was updated. Not by hand, not by system, but by the protocol itself. Status: Kill protocol inactive. Guardian asset recovered. Subject secured. Risk neutralized. Then, under that, a line appeared without user input. Next violation will not receive a warning. And beneath that, one last entry, the most dangerous one of all. The girl has stopped being afraid.